Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Surroundscapes, the podcast that covers all areas of AV that is hosted by Blue Sound Professional but isn't particularly all about us. And this time we have a partner spotlight with a wonderful partner to us, NETGEAR, and we have on the line two people, Nicoel Lewis, who's a ProAV Senior Systems Engineer, and Devin Cress, who's the Director of ProAV Manufacturers OEM. So welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Graham. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you both on. I've just seen you, Devin, at ISE, but Nicoel wasn't there. But to start with, can you start, Nicoel, with your career to date and how you ended up in NETGEAR?
Yes, Graham, it's been a long career. I'm a network engineer that worked for a lot of large corporations, for example, Shell Oil, Johnson Controls, and doing a lot of designs and integration of networks for customers and those corporations. I came into NETGEAR about 7 years ago in the IT group. And 3 years ago, I came over to the AV side, and it's been terrific. With the progress that we've made in just that 3-year period that I've been in the group is really impactful. So I do a lot of designs, I do some integration, and a lot of hands-on trainings with integrators and end users.
And what led you to come to NETGEAR?
So I actually live in Washington State, and NETGEAR had a position open in their IT group. Since I came from that side, I was fortunate enough to be hired and supported all of North America. So doing some cybersecurity applications, a lot of networking, a lot of configuration of switches, and a lot of end user support.
Great. And how about you, Devin? What's been your career to date?
Yeah, so I've been in the Pro AV world for 25 plus years, working for various different manufacturers. So in the broadcast, the UC environment, speaker manufacturers, and my journey to NETGEAR, started about 6 years ago or so. And I was contacted by NETGEAR, and they said, we're looking for somebody to really help develop our AV product line. And move things forward. And I kind of put a pause for a second, and I was like, like AV, NETGEAR. I was like, I see you guys, you're big, you're at Best Buy, you guys sell $59 switches. Sure, in the AV space, I see, these little throwdown boxes, and, people use them and they're great, but what exactly, are you looking for somebody that has a background in AV? I'm not in the business of selling $59 throwdown switches. So they had to really explain it to me, and it was a great, interesting journey that they went along as well. NETGEAR produced those $59 switches, but they also had a full line of managed switches. And some of those managed switches were being used for SDVoE deployments, 10 gig, and they started to see all these names come up in their POS reports. It's names that we knew because we come from the AV world, like AVI-SPL and Diversified and CTI. They had no idea who they were. They didn't know what they were doing with these switches. They did, start to push into it a little bit, understood it was AV over IP, but they really were over their heads. And so they wanted to bring in a few people that had some expertise in the AV world and really develop, that solution. That's where, that really became interesting, starting with a great product and being able to build on that product, and also having the backing of a great company to develop the products that are needed specifically for AV. So I've been here for about 6 years. It's been a great journey, and we've absolutely considerably grown the business, and there's much more to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting this because I've been involved with various switch manufacturers over my career in AV, and NETGEAR is the only one that seems to have specifically targeted our industry and said, okay, this is important to us. We want to be able to target that market and go after it and specifically understand the market better. I remember you telling me that you held some sessions with people involved in the
Oh
market to
yeah.
try and understand more about it. Can you talk more about that?
So we actually call that our ProAV Council, and we're getting ready to do another one. So that started about 1 hour after I joined, NETGEAR. We needed to hear from the customers what they needed, what was, holding up the development and, push forward of AV over IP. So, one of the first steps that we took is we had a great switch. This was our M4300 line, but honestly speaking, it was an IT switch. It sounded like a 747 jet. It was loud, but it
Hmm.
performed the tasks. But we knew that we could do better. And so we wanted to understand, like, I've been doing this a long time. And, AV over IP has been around a long time. It's gone down in cost, but it really, hadn't been adopted at the speed of some other technologies. And so something was holding it back, and we had to discover what that was. So we brought in a lot of leaders, CTOs from various companies like CTI, AVISPL, consultants from Shen Wilkinson and TCOM, and we really set them all in a room. And we said, what do we need to do physically with a switch? How can we help you out in your deployments? What's holding you back from doing more AV over IP? And a lot of things came out of this. I mean, there's the physical things that people needed. So, put the ports in, the back with the power, make the front of it clean. So it's clean in the AV rack. Give us a ton of PoE power. We're building products that require ultra PoE in some cases for touch panels. These are all things that are easy for us to do. Yep, we can do that, not a problem. But one of the most important things, and I think differentiators that came out of that meeting, was that we heard from people like John Richards, who was part of that at AVISPL, who's in engineering at that organization, and he said, Devin, AV over IP is fantastic. It's finally come down to scale that, at a certain size, this makes more sense. It has more flexibility. But our problem is a large organization like us only has so many people that are qualified to be able to configure these switches. And, we're not getting help from, the big switch companies that are out there that aren't focused. They're focused in IT and other places. They don't understand, Dante. And what we really need is, instead of sending out these very high level, high cost people to deploy these systems, because every AV over IP system I deploy, I'm flying somebody out, they have to commission it. It costs me 10 grand. Like, that doesn't scale. He said, I need to have the local people, the people that are, the junior techs that can commission, that we're paying $30 or $40 an hour, to be able to successfully deploy these systems. So that led us to develop what we call the AV UI. And this was more centric to, what AV people see, drop-down menus, a picture of the switch, profiles that are built. And that led us to, creating profiles to solve problems. We're, currently, working on one that's going to be deployed with your company, Blue Sound Professional. And we have, over 500 different partner manufacturers. What inevitably does that do? It makes it easy to deploy these systems, and it saves time, and you're not going to roll trucks. One of the best quotes that we have from one of our partners that was also, in that ProAV Council, is the CTO of CTI, Eric Schneider. And he recently, told us that, for every dollar that he spends on a NETGEAR switch, he's saving, $5, in labor. Like, the cost to deploy these systems has gone down so much every time that they use, a NETGEAR switch, that when you start to calculate it, by buying NETGEAR switches, some of these organizations are saving millions and millions and millions of dollars in labor costs. Once again, that's great for the integrator, but it's also great for, the end user and the experience, because they're going to have systems that work, that are up all the time. And that's really helped and, push AV over IP forward. And I think it's one of the things that and I think many of the people at NETGEAR are most proud of, that we've really helped push this AV over IP revolution forward with simplifying the deployments of the switches and listening to our customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a few bits in what you said there. Certainly, PoE is very important to us at Blue Sound Pro, and even in my past job at Biamp, we were introducing PoE product, and we use PoE Plus, PoE Plus Plus, Type 4 PoE now, 90-watt PoE in our latest product that we unveiled at ISE last week. And we see NETGEAR as the best supplier at AV prices, I'll say, of switches that do that, particularly that do that and have the budget to be able to put multiple devices. Because there's one thing getting a switch with PoE++, for example, but if there isn't the power budget to allow us to plug multiple devices in, it's not useful to us, because a lot of the PoE devices we're deploying are loudspeakers, and we use lots of them in a space. So NETGEAR is, our go-to supplier of that. And yeah,
I mean, some of the big boy switches that we have, in our 4250 line, we have a 48 port switch that has 3 110 outlets on it that's pushing out something close to 2,700 watts of power. And when we do PoE++, we're going with the higher spec. We're, have capability to do 90 watts. In fact, depending upon the distance you're going, that actually can bump up even higher to 100 plus watts on that. So we've really paid attention, but it's amazing, how many devices are connected with PoE power these days, and we're the switch to supply it.
Mm-hmm. And it literally is just the cost of the switch, Graham. We don't have all of these additional fees. As I've worked at a lot of corporations, I used to deploy and install a lot of the other switch manufacturers, and there's license fees, maintenance fees, and so it literally is just the cost of our switch that you pay for. So it becomes very cost effective.
Yeah, from your BIAMP days, Graham, the AVB licenses and how complicated they were. We thought that we needed to do it the way that everybody else did it. So when we first implemented AVB on our 4250 switches, we had a licensing model, and it was so complicated. It had a different license for every switch. People were mixing it up, and we said, this just isn't worth it. And we're here to make this easy to deploy these systems. So it was a number of years ago that we decided, like, the end of licenses. We're just going to absorb the cost of AVB. And if you're using an AVB solution, every single switch that we have in the AV line is going to be able to support that in the 4250 and 4350 series. No licensing fees, just simple, easy deployments, no complications.
And that's interesting. I mean, one of the things that led BIAMP into AVB was the fact it was an open standard, and we radically believe in open standards that aren't owned by companies, because previously that's caused us problems. That caused us problems with ether sound. It caused us problems with CobraNet to do with Peak Audio getting acquired by Cirrus Logic and not developing it. So being able to have a open standard that no one owns, a set of IEEE standards, leads to a couple of things. One, it doesn't go away, and two, there are no license fees inherently. There are often people build in license fees, but you're not paying IEEE anything to use their protocols. But another thing, we're just implementing Dante now on a number of our devices, and in much of the industry, Dante, which is a proprietary protocol owned by Audinate, has won over because it's easy to implement. But one of the things we were talking to Audinate about at ISE last week, and we've been talking about for a while, is driving down the costs of those licenses, so that even a Dante license will become table stakes, which I think is important to them in their future as well, in terms of really getting mass market Dante deployment. So how do you see AV protocols? You must work with a number. We've talked about AVB and Dante, but there's video protocols, there's all sorts of protocols that we as an industry use. How do you see that development going?
Well, I mean, there are so many different protocols that are out there. In the video side of it, we have 1 gig, we have 10 gig SDVoE, we have variations of those. We have AVB, we have Dante, we have new video things that are coming out like IPMX. that's done by the AIMS, which once again is kind of an open standard that's been created. So, for us, NETGEAR, I like to sometimes say is a little bit of Switzerland. When these people are developing these new technologies, and, there's some people that are doing, development of 8K over 2.5 gig. We're always trying to be ahead of that. So, whatever that technology is, we're involved in it at the beginning. People are reaching out to us and saying, this is what we're putting together. I mean, I'll go back to IPMX. We started working with the team that was developing that 5 years ago, from the very beginning. So if we have a voice in it and they give us enough time, we're going to build the switches to support everything and continue to be the Switzerland that really can move any traffic whatsoever, that comes to us.
Yeah, that's great to hear. The one area that AVB in our industry, I mean, AVB is widely adopted in other industries because it is the kind of deterministic protocol of the Internet of Things. And I remain frustrated that our industry hasn't deployed it more widely. But the one area it is deployed is high-end live sound with the Milan subset of the protocol. So basically any large-scale concert you go to will be deploying AVB.
I've seen it many times. Yeah. So, once again, our partners, so Low Acoustics and DMV and, some of the best in the industry, are using that. And it's because of its time protocol. I was at a Lollapalooza concert in Chicago a couple of years ago, Low Acoustics, deployment there. And, just the synchronization and timing between the arrays that they can do in a large stage like that. There's nothing that can do it like, quite as good as AVB. So it's a fantastic protocol for those applications.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine at L Acoustic a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying he can't remember the last time he talked about Dante because L Acoustic is so all in with AVB. In terms of NETGEAR's embrace of the ProAV market, I remember you telling me that one of the things that defined you is that you're here to help, that you want to help AV users, manufacturers, integrators to be able to use networks to help them solve their network problems. Can you talk more about that?
I'm going to let Nicoel take that one. This is her team and what she does on a day-to-day basis. So go for it.
Yeah. So, Graham, our group, we have a global group, the ProAV design team, and there's approximately 22 of us. But in North America, there are 7 of us. And specifically, what we focus on is putting together a proper design, network design, speccing the right switches based on the conversations with the end user or integrator. Depending on how many encoders they have, how many decoders, the placement of those devices, where's the majority of the traffic going to go, what manufacturing partners are they using. And so we put together a certified design, we stand behind it, and submit that for the end user or integrator. And then after the purchase has taken place, if they need assistance in implementation, we have professional services. So, of course, we can go out and actually assist in the install or do the staging in the warehouse prior to. So that is all of our team. That's a lot of the service that we offer, in addition to going out and actually doing hands-on trainings with the end users and integrators. So we do pre-sales, post-sales support, any sort of issues that arise. That is our group. Yeah.
I want to highlight, this education piece because I think it's so important, in this industry. So we've spent a lot of time and money on it. You can go to NETGEAR's Academy and you can take online CTS accredited courses for various different tracks, whether it's AV over IP, 2110 standard networking, and we continue to develop that. it's become so widely used that we actually have a number of manufacturers. So if you go there, we're actually hosting about 10, and it's growing, manufacturers training courses on there as well. So we're becoming kind of the place to go for that kind of training. But, online training is great. We're a big proponent of in-person training, hands-on training. And we do this day in and day out, and Nicole's team does that. And I think that kind of confidence that, people know that NETGEAR cares and is there, they've never seen from a switch manufacturer. It's not a place that they're focused, but this is the right size and right place market for NETGEAR, where we're willing to develop products specifically and training tracks specifically for the AV marketplace.
Yeah, and we've sent some of our employees to your training, and I kind of really want to back up that this is not just words, because we recently had a reason to come and ask you for help, because we had a network issue in a very large deployment, and we were beyond our level of expertise. And there was no particular reason that NETGEAR needed to help. It certainly wasn't your problem, but we asked you for some help, and you were so good to us in terms of how your engineering, your team, Nicoel, helping our team understand what was going on and whether we were doing anything wrong. And so I really want to tell our viewers that when NETGEAR say they're there to help, they really are there to help. It's not just words.
I mean, this is one of my favorite ones, and if you don't mind, I just want to share it because I love, fun stories. So we had one of our SEs, we approved a design. It was in New York City, and, they kept pointing the fingers at the switch. They said, it's the switch, it's the switch, you need to get somebody out here. And we said, well, we approved the design. Okay, we're going to get somebody out there and we're going to take a look at it. So we get out there day one. Everything looks like it's right. We're looking at all the logs, like nothing seems to be wrong, but there keeps coming up black screens on the screen. We've always seen the black screen of death in AV. So, it was day two, person's been on site from NETGEAR, and just out of a hunch, he's like, let me just check the cabling. And so he went out and he bought some new cabling, specifically HDMI cables, and realized in this multi-million-dollar deployment that they used HDMI 1.2. And they replaced the cables and put in the proper cables, and everything started working again. So lesson to be learned, we're there to back you up. Lesson two, don't go buy 99-cent cables.
That's right. Or optics.
Yeah, or optics or SFPs.
Don't cheap out on the optics.
It's one place not to cheap out. But that just kind of shows you, we didn't say, hey, it wasn't us, we're going to charge you for, all that travel and everything. We said, here, we're in this together. And you know what that meant? That meant that we had a partner for life, and every deployment that they did in the future involved NETGEAR.
Yeah, right. And we certainly feel that way because we recommend you. We don't exactly mandate NETGEAR. We heavily recommend NETGEAR. We talked about profiles earlier, and I want to ask Nicoel more about. We're just about to launch or you're just about to launch a Bluesound Professional profile, and what does that actually mean to people using switches?
Yeah, it's. I'm very excited about this profile, Graham. We've been working on it for approximately 5 months, I believe it is now, and we're estimating that it'll be released the end of Q1. And it is a Bluesound Professional profile that the end user will be able to select when they go into the switch or switches from the Engage controller, which is a local app that we don't charge for, and it allows you to manage all of your switches from a single pane of glass. So the user can go and select Bluesound Professional, and I want that profile to be applied to these ports on all of these switches. And you apply it, it's done. And what's going on in the background is all of the requirements that are that make that profile optimally work is applied at the interface level as well as the global level. And then as we've released a profile, then we also make updates or enhancements each quarter, or by every couple of quarters, based on the end user's input and also by the manufacturer. So I'm very excited about this one. And so it's not an easy process. We have to certify the hardware with the profile, and right now it's in QA's hands. So I'm very excited about it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the great things I think, to add to is I kind of look at, Netgear switches is like kind of like Teslas. They constantly get updated and get new features. When we release these profiles, and as Nicoel said, we do it about every 3 months. Your switches get better and better and better over time. And every M4250 or 4350 switch that we've ever sold will have this Blue Sound professional profile on it. So it's backwards compatible. When those get updated, you're going to get everything that's new on the switch.
Yeah, we do exactly the same with our products. I always say to people, the worst your product is going to be is the day you unbox it. It's going to get better from there. As you say, I had a Tesla. I now have a Polestar. Both of the cars add functionality with time. And it really follows a software forward kind of evolution in our industry, where previously to get new stuff, you had to change one box for another box. And now to get new stuff, it's simply an over-the-air update. And it's a really interesting change in our industry. We'll probably talk more about that in a minute. But I know, Devin, that you have to drop out in a few minutes for another appointment. So before we lose you, I do want to talk to you about trends that you're seeing, what you saw at ISE last week, other trends you're seeing in the AV industry, because you're in a really great position as network equipment suppliers to see these big overall trends.
We both were at the show last week, and it was an absolutely phenomenal, record-breaking show for attendance on that side. I actually really enjoy the ISE show because it brings what I consider to be about 5 shows that I have to do in the U.S. into one roof. What that does is it actually gives exposure to a lot of people. So say you are in the lighting market or broadcast market, you're going to be able to see what technologies are available in different spaces, whether that's commercial AV, whether it's sound, etc. So we're seeing kind of a cross-pollination between all these fields and the technologies being deployed, across not just broadcast, but some broadcast solutions going into commercial applications. I talked to a lot of Fortune 500 companies that were at the show. They do largely commercial AV, deployments, UC rooms, etc. But they also have a side of broadcast studios, and some of the things we're trying to enable are economically priced 2110 switches, so that it becomes more viable for them to put together, a professional broadcast studio in these kind of applications, and that also transfers to higher education. We joined an organization called HETMA, Higher Education Technology Management Association. Basically, it's the leaders at every one of the universities. And this is a really powerful organization, and there's a lot of AV and commercial, classroom, broadcast, all the way up to the stadiums that they're doing. So, we see a lot more of the technology going into those locations. One interesting one that we're joining and becoming part of, and I see that a lot of people are, is security becomes more and more important. Security becomes so important that NETGEAR saw this, and decided about a year ago or so that we needed to acquire a company. We acquired a company called Exium for zero trust environments to create further and deeper security within these organizations. Interestingly enough, Microsoft is, got into the game, and they created a solution called MDEP. And you're going to see, or at ISE, I saw a lot of companies that we're all familiar with, companies like QSC and Crestron and Shure, that are in these UC environments that are implementing NDEP. NETGEAR is involved in that as well. So the ability to have trusted environments, trusted devices within these organizations is incredibly important these days with the amount of hackers and people trying to penetrate. So I absolutely see that, is a trend within the space that NETGEAR is paying attention to.
Any other trends that you saw? Certainly this kind of the spread of broadcast into the corporate environment, into everyone's a content creator, says he, the podcast host. You're seeing more and more companies with their own broadcast studios. We actually have one in our head office as well. What other trends are you seeing?
Yeah, so it's the as I said, the cross-pollination between all these different technologies that are out there. So if I had to point out specific companies, to that side, we work very closely with companies like Ross, and these deployments that a lot of these big broadcast manufacturers did in the past, and they still do a lot. I'm doing a call letter station, a 3-letter New York, one that cost $50 million. They're now seeing the opportunity in developing technologies that cross-pollinate. So NDI workflows working with SMPTE 2110. We also see one of the largest deployments for a half commercial, half broadcast. It can do both technology, IPMX. That's publicly information, but they just did the JP Morgan Chase headquarters, and I saw some of the people from JP Morgan Chase. That involved so many different technologies. Every time I went and talked to one of our partner manufacturers, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're in that. We did that." And so, who was that? There were people like QSC. The Ross, was in that. Megapixel LED video walls and processing were in it. NETGEAR was in it. It was so many different technologies. As I went around and talked to people, it is an amazing application of that, what I'm mentioning, kind of cross-pollination of all these technologies being used in one space. So I see that as something that we're going to continue to see. The beauty is that, NETGEAR is working with all these companies, and we're kind of in a unique place, like Nicole's team is, where we've brought in a lot of these technologies to our engineering labs. And, just like we helped you out, if there's a Ross product and a QSC product, like Ross and QSC don't have each other's products most of the time, but NETGEAR does. And so we're in kind of a unique place to be able to troubleshoot these really unique, innovative experiences that our integrators are putting together with all these great technologies that we produce these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting.
So many different verticals too. Yeah. We're seeing a lot in the federal courts, which you typically wouldn't think of, okay, federal courts, but over the last couple of years, we've been doing working with a lot of the courts for assistance on designs and deployments. And Texas State Capitol, House of Legislature, a lot of Ross video there, a lot of Dante, 42 switches. So completely forklifting their old, antiquated AV network. So we're
the
seeing
thing I
a
love
lot
about
different verticals. Yeah.
As you talk about the court system, the thing I love about this industry is everybody talks to everybody. So it's really recommendations. I look at that court system, and we've had huge success worldwide. Whether it's in the U.S. or Europe, there's a lot of deployments and need there. We also look at the higher education side. All these people talk to each other about the technologies that are working. So for us, some of the most important thing is just word of mouth. Like, let me tell you about the deployment that I had using Blue Sound Professional and NETGEAR. It just worked. And it was the most satisfying, experience that I've had. Like, that's how we grow these businesses together, and we create delighted customers.
Yeah, the court vertical, I was very involved in BIAMP and this whole kind of like court technology shows and things. It's a very niche vertical, but there's actually quite a lot of business in it. You mentioned Megapixel in one of the recent deployments, and I was kind of learning more about them last week because my friend Laura Frank, who runs the framework body of pixel professionals, has just joined Megapixel, and I was learning more about what they did and more about her position as kind of creative interface. And it's really interesting to me that in the video side of the industry, the creators and the technologists are far closer than they are in the audio side of the industry.
Oh
And
yeah.
and it's something that we really have to work on. I don't think we're doing enough work on this because the UCC space is the only place where we create our own content. Content is created by musicians, by video artists, um, by talented people, and we as technologists don't have these conversations we should be having with them. So we can geek out at a particular feature we have or you have, but to a creator, that's unimportant. It's like, here are my dreams. Can you help me realize them? Or here's what we've got. Did you know we could do this? Oh, that's fantastic. I'll use it that way. And I really wish for our industry that were more conversations around that interface between the creative community and the technology community.
There's a lot of amazing things that can be done. I mean, some of the applications that I'm familiar with that companies like Megapixel, have done, are, the Mandalorian. So the entire Mandalorian set is megapixel LED video walls. None of it is real. It's these virtual sets. So, I've been, on stage and seen some of those, and the technology and the content that's created is, amazing. We have, companies like AB Stump that have Pixera that, are doing amazing things, with content creation and virtual sets and immersive, things inside museums, which is, another place that we see a lot of that. So, the technology and, the industry continues to evolve. I agree with you. We need to get these people together. But, going back to the show we were just at, I think ISE probably did the best I've ever seen at any show of bringing so many of those people together from different verticals.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because I was actually stuck on our booth the whole show. I had meetings from the first hour to the last hour, so I got no real feel about what was going on at ISE. I better let you go, Devin, because you're already a few minutes past the time.
I really appreciate the time, and I'll let you and Nicole take it from here.
Okay, thanks, and I'll see you soon. So, Nicoel, I wanted to talk more with you about various things around cybersecurity and how you help create trusted networks. And I also wanted to talk to you about your Engage controller and what that will enable. So in whatever order you like, could you talk about those subjects?
Yeah, Graham. I'll start with the Engage controller. So it's a local app. It's a software app that you can download from our site. We don't charge for it. And what it allows you to do is configure all of your switches from a single pane of glass. And when you go into the Engage controller, you go through a process. It's called onboarding the switches. And you bring all of your switches into a site that you've created, and you can have many sites within Engage. So let's say, for example, you've got a higher ed university. They may have one site as one building, they may have a site as another building, and 10 to 20 switches in each, depending on how large it is. And when you go into the Engage controller, you can create your VLANs with your profiles in this global area. It's called Site Settings. And what it does is it pushes that profile to all of your switches, so you don't have to individually go into each switch and configure each and every switch with the VLANs and the profiles that you want. So it makes life so much easier for end users and integrators when they're deploying it. And then if you want to just add a couple of ports to a Blue Sound Professional profile, then you just go into that switch within Engage and just select those ports and add it to that profile. So it's very easy. We also have other features called auto lag and auto trunk. So when you need to double the bandwidth between a couple of switches, so let's say you've got um, two switches with a 10 gig uplink between the two. If you need to add another 10 gig link, you can just literally connect the second cable and it auto lags for you. So then that 10 becomes a 20. Um, so we've got features like that, auto trunking, where as soon as you connect that second switch, all of those VLANs are trunked on that port, on that uplink port. So it makes things a lot easier to use the Engage controller. Now, one thing that we're looking at coming out with is a hardware Engage controller, so that many people can actually go into the controller at the same time and make changes. Right now, it's really meant just for one person to make changes at one time. So that'll integrate with different APIs, um, uh, PTP, Hound. There's all different kinds of integrations that you'll be able to use with that. So yeah, so we're excited about that.
And is that something that you have to be local to do, or can you do that remotely?
So I have a lot of guys out there that have installs that have all of their out of band management ports configured statically and connected to just a dummy switch with a remote PC. So currently they can remote in. We don't have anything cloud based at this time. We're looking at a cloud based option.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also too, there's something that's going to be called like an offline provisioning. So for those integrators that are waiting for their switches to come in, they can actually create a site and create all of the VLANs, the networks the way that they want to. And then when they get that hardware, they onboard the hardware and that entire configuration is pushed to those switches
That,
once you onboard. So that saves time, right? Yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah. So
that's very.
very, very exciting. We have some good things on the horizon. Yeah, yeah,
And then,
definitely.
talk more about creating trusted environments behind switches, and allowing AV manufacturers to work more easily on corporate networks.
Right. So I have a lot of customers that have our AV network switches running in parallel to a corporate data network, but they need to uplink to that corporate data network for either management access or internet access. And we can very easily do that through um, certain kinds of VLANs. We can block multicast on that uplink port, which is usually, as an IT person, that is our biggest fear. We don't want multicast flooding our network. So there are many different ways to implement uh, security aspects where you're not interfering with the current infrastructure. With this new company that we've purchased, uh, we're looking at how we can integrate some higher end security type features on our switches. We do have TAA compliant switches.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a lot of government facilities that require certain kinds of radius authentication, things like that, that we can already work with. So, yeah. So stay tuned for more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's disabling multicast on uplink is important to us
Yes.
because we require um, multicast as part of the way that we work. And as you say, that is often a sticking point with corporate IT.
It is.
And therefore, that ability to basically act as a firewall between the AV network and the rest of the network in that respect.
Yeah. I always find that the more conversations that I have with IT, it there are different ways that we can implement security functions that make them feel better about it, right? So, of course, blocking multicast on the uplink, spanning tree, how is it that they have their spanning tree configured compared to ours? We can work with access lists, of course. MAC reservations are very common, so there are different ways that we can implement things to make them feel more warm and fuzzy about having our switches run in parallel to their network.
So you talked about a couple of things there that are kind of on the edge of most AV people's network knowledge: MAC reservations and spanning tree. How do your classes help educate people?
They do.
They do.
They do. As a matter of fact, I don't let people off easy. We go over spanning tree. They have to configure spanning tree properly, which we've made it very easy. But they have to go over spanning tree, lags, different types of trunking, routing between the VLANs or once they take it up to layer 3, if they want to only route between a couple of the VLANs and not the others, how do they do that? So with the hands-on experience, it's so satisfying, Graham, to go in there first thing in the morning, and a lot of them are AV guys, and they don't know networking, and they shouldn't have to know like the ins and outs and CLI of networking. But by the end of the day, they've set up spanning tree, they've set up loops, they've got 4 switches that they've worked together, and they've configured it all in a very short period of time, and then they can see multicast working. So it's really fun to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you say they don't have to know, but there is an element that networking is such a core technology now to AV that we can no longer say we don't understand that. It's not our business. It is our business. And so many of the devices nowadays are network connected.
Yes.
We were talking earlier about AVB, and one of the reasons that AVB didn't get more traction early on in the AV industry is that you have to build your own stacks, and it's not made easy for you in the way that Dante is and CobraNet is, where a company that's making money out of it, so Peak Audio and Audionate, are producing hardware that it's almost like an internal dongle for a device. So you can make a loudspeaker a network device, or a microphone a network device. But I think it's vitally important for our industry that we learn to embrace networking. We learn to be unafraid of getting in there and learning about it, because it's so key to our industry. So central.
Absolutely. There are things that you do need to know that we teach. So, I mean, what is a VLAN? What is IGMP? What is PIM routing? One thing that we do very well is IGMP plus, so Internet Group Management Protocol. But we don't flood the network. It's very, very efficient. But there are things that are required for IGMP to work properly. So there's fast leave, there's a querier. So we definitely go over those things that they should know, especially in troubleshooting. So, for example, if I've got one streaming device, if I've got an encoder and it's streaming to a decoder, how much bandwidth do I need to have on that network, right? Or on that link? Am I going to be streaming out to other parts of the network? So a lot of the design concepts we go over. So they do have to understand networking to an extent, but certainly not like when I over the years, going into CLI and having to, go into each port interface and configure things there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
things are getting easier, but
they
so
are.
part of it is about being able to understand and design, but also part of it is a language. So if you're talking to corporate IT people,
Right.
knowing about what they're talking about. It's very similar in our part of the industry where we're talking about music services and licensing and what you can do in a commercial space and what sort of performing rights organization licensing you need. And it's kind of, we don't need to teach people that because we make the hardware. It's up to them what music service they put on top of it. But we believe it's important to educate the market so that they can understand what it is to be legal in a commercial space in terms of music.
Right.
And when people come in and talk about, well, have you got such and such type of license, and they can actually know what people are talking about and answer them in an articulate way, and that they can be compliant and in our case legal. So I really applaud what you're doing in terms of just a general up leveling of the industry knowledge. Before we finish, is there anything else that you'd like to cover? I think we've covered an awful lot, but anything else?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think about where I started 30 years ago, in token ring and yeah, and the days of 3270 emulation and I look at where we are now and everybody or I'll say a lot of people think, oh, okay, AV um, uh, maybe it's going to slow down or it's going to kind of cap out, and I don't see it, Graham.
Yeah.
I'm sure, and obviously with Blue Sound, um, what you all do is absolutely amazing. And I don't see it slowing down. So I often ask myself, where is it going to be 30 years from now? Uh, or just even 10 years? And I think AV, the integration of AV, I think that we are going to have it everywhere. Everywhere that we walk, we already see digital signage. We see it at all of our entertainment venues. The federal courts, it's amazing to sit in a courtroom and and go through a trial, or sit in a trial for a day or two and actually see all of this technology just bubbling on the surface, and they're starting to implement it everywhere.
Mhm.
I mean, what do you see? I don't. Where do you think it's going to be 10 years from now?
Well, it's interesting because yeah, we are involved. The whole central tenet of our business is music streaming, which is something that 10 years ago we didn't do. We bought music. Just like 10 years ago, we went to Blockbuster to rent DVDs,
Right.
and now we're all, on Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu. 10 years ago, we bought tracks on the iTunes Music Store, and now we stream with Spotify or Covas or Tidal or Amazon or Apple. Before that, we bought physical media, and we still do to some extent. But so the way that we consume media has changed dramatically, and it will change even more. And there's huge back end implications about the way we consume media. For example, and this probably is not commonly known by most people, but most of the commercial music services to date have downloaded content to site and played it locally. And the problem with that is that you actually own that content locally. And what that means is you have to get sign off from the record companies and publishing houses by territory, by track, to actually use that information. Whereas if you're streaming, it's more like listening to the radio. The central library has to be licensed, but you don't have to worry about it. And what that means for businesses is it cuts out so much of the friction of having to individually clear licenses for content, because that's all looked after in the cloud.
Right.
Another trend that I'm seeing more and more is the devolution of the network to the endpoint. So that, a few years ago, I used to get asked about IoT and is our industry, what's the relationship between AV and IoT? And I used to say to people, we are central in this because IoT is at core machines talking to other machines without human intervention. And so many of the algorithms that we use in our industry, the likes of feedback suppression, ambient noise compensation, acoustic echo cancellation, are exactly that, taking sensor input, making decisions on that sensor input without any input from human beings. So it's almost, that question almost is redundant. I mean, we are, whether we like it, it's not what is our relationship with it, it is central to us. And being able to push more and more to the endpoint within the network gives us the ability to monitor to the endpoint, to capture data, because our industry is at heart a sensor industry. We use cameras and microphones that are input sensors. We use displays and loudspeakers, which are output devices. We process in the middle. We're in a unique position to utilize this, to monitor it, to make intelligent, informed decisions about data. And this gets me incredibly frustrated, particularly with AI and LLMs, and the fact that we've paid so little attention as a society to dataset biases and to TDM laws, text and data mining laws, and how we use data is absolutely pivotal as we move forward. We're at a real inflection point, I think, in the technology industry. How we bring in AI, how we understand AI. I mean, we've been talking about networking, but AI is another level again. And I absolutely agree with you. I'm an old man now, and it gets more and more difficult for me. But what I do know is the speed of change will accelerate just as it always has done before. That a technology like AI, for example, nuclear fusion's another one from a while ago, the internet, computers, they're not evil or good. They just are. They're technologies. It's how we use them that makes them evil or good. And we need to understand that. We need to be unafraid, but cognizant of the dangers and move forward. So I totally agree that things are moving fast in technology and in AV as a part of technology.
They are, and to your point, embracing the data and how AI is going to come into play. It reminds me of when I worked at Shell years ago, and my very first AV project 25 years ago was deploying multi-point video conferencing on deepwater oil rigs. There were 6 rigs, 250 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico. And the objective was for all of these rigs to be able to have a multi-point video conference with the exploration and production people in New Orleans. Now, what is that today? Oh, by the way, this was all over DS3, over satellites that we owned. So, what is that today? It's Teams, it's Zoom, it's, all of these different mechanisms that we have. And that was just 25 years ago. But now, think about that same type of application and how AI will come into play, right? Can AI actually analyze those ROV findings at the bottom of the ocean a bit better, of course, right? So, yeah, very interesting.
So little of our equipment in our industry is learning in the way that my thermostat is in my house or my car is of my behavior. And that's just simple ML at that point. We're obsessed as an industry with the UCC space, and that's becoming more and more and more commoditized with like a monitor and a soundbar. And I say, and listeners will have heard me say often, that I think it's the least interesting part of the workplace, because the overall workplace, executive briefing rooms, experience centers, the lobbies are more interesting until we start to be able to make use of the data that we're getting in those meeting rooms. So, for example, was it a happy meeting or a sad meeting? Was it a contentious meeting? Were the remote participants in that meeting given equal equity to the local participants? So we're beginning to analyze how many people were in the room. Did they need that big meeting room, or could they use a smaller meeting room? That's really the start of it. It's like, what's the sentiment tracking in that meeting room? And so I think that we have a huge amount ahead of us in terms of the value that we can glean from the data, along with a responsibility for anonymization. And that's the balance that in all technologies we have to go through. We launched at ISE last week this Moonsonic powered by Blue Sound Professional, which is biophilic soundscaping in the built environment. And again, this is something that has only recently become possible or really nuanced with AI, the ability to create these natural soundscapes to benefit worker health, and in the healthcare environment to shorten patient recovery times by using sound. It's usually part of a multisensory suite of stimuli, but being able to be thoughtful about this. And I've spent my career kind of at that edge of the industry, where with streaming, we're trying to lead the industry into streaming. With biophilic soundscaping, we're trying to lead the industry into more thoughtful thought about the effect of sound in the built environment. And that's not going to stop. There's always going to be new stuff.
Right. It's an exciting time. It definitely is, Graham. I love it.
So thank you so much, and thank you for Devin, who's left already. I do have to emphasize how importantly we view our partnership. We really see NETGEAR as a fantastic partner to us. How can people learn more about what you're doing?
So a great way of doing it is actually emailing us, proavdesign@netgear.com, and that is our group. I'd say that's probably the best way. And of course, our website, we have a whole AV section about all of our different models of switches, etc. But if you need guidance, if you need help with the design, we do all of that at no cost. And yeah, I'd say that's the best way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nicoel. It's great to see you again. And I think I'll be seeing you in person in Portland in a few weeks.
Yes, I'm very excited about that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So thanks also to our listeners. This is a partner profile part of Surroundscapes. We have hot topics, we have tech Q&A, we have case studies. They're available every Tuesday on YouTube, on Blue Sound Professional /surroundscapes.com, on your favorite podcast application. So please tune in, please like and subscribe as always, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Graham.